Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again are my co-hosts, Richie and Alec Crowdhamel. Guys, the Big Ten media, the Big Ten training camp tour stopped by in Piscataway yesterday. Saw practice. They went on the air for an hour and talked about everything Rutgers. We'll get into what they said and more, but first, this podcast is presented to you by FanDuel. And if you got in on the Rutgers spread yesterday, you really lucked out because it is now at minus 13.5 on FanDuel for the Scarlet Knights against the Ohio Bobcats. That line opened at 10.5 and is now surging. So there must be something brewing there because the bets are flowing in on the Scarlet Knights. Let's talk about what the general vibe of the program was. And they were effusive with their praise of the offense. So, guys, let's start there. Just right off the top, we'll start with the quarterback position. They had a lot of good things to say, not only about Ethan, but about the backup, AJ Serace, as well. But let's start with Ethan. Alec, what were some things that they said about Ethan that really kind of stood out to you?
Just his comfort and his experience with Kirk Ciarrocca, I think, was the thing that kind of stood out to them the most. One thing that Ethan talked about himself when him and Gus Zelinskis went on to talk with the studio guys, that the communication between all the levels is really there. So just to having another year in the system, getting more comfortable with some of the guys, I think that was the biggest thing that kind of stood out. Yeah, like you said, there was a lot of praise for the offense and that they could continue on that upward trajectory. And that's something that I want to say both Kirk Ciarrocca and Greg Schiano both noted as well when talking about Ethan. It was kind of like that midpoint, like we saw down the stretch of the season. It's kind of like the USC game where things really started to click for him and then it just went straight up trajectory from there. And Greg Schiano said that that's something that, we need him to continue to do, and we think that he can do it. So, yeah, there was a lot of praise for Caliac Manis, just, another year in the system, continuing his trajectory from last year. And, yeah, it's a lot of praise on the receivers too, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But for Ethan, yeah, it was just his comfort level, his communication with the guys, just being in the system for another year. Greg Schiano said a bunch of times this is his team now, so just having that level of comfort and leadership, that was one thing that they were really impressed with.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that independently, Ciarrocca and Schiano both said, the back half, the final 6-7 games, Kirk specifically said the UCLA or USC game, I think he meant the USC game, that things really started to come together. And it seemed, and Greg specifically said, Ethan started to trust his training and not think as much out there. And he showed a lot more confidence over that last part of the season. One thing I thought that was interesting that Jake Butt said was that Ethan's ball placement all day was perfect. Like he said that you can be accurate, but it's just as important to place a ball in an area that only a receiver can get it, leading guys. And he said Ethan's ball placement really stood out to him throughout the day. Rich, how about you? What were some things that were said about the quarterbacks that stood out?
I think it's interesting that they just noted, like you guys kind of said everything about how Ethan just got a lot better and how they raved about him. AJ Serace too. I think that's always a big note because that is the future there. I know we've been saying it for a long time. We know the staff's very high on him. We know he has all the tools and probably a higher ceiling than Ethan. But Ethan right now is just overall a better player and a smarter player too. I think when it comes down to AJ Serace, I think he's going to take more shots next year. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if that offense not only takes a leap this year, but what it can do with a more talented, more versatile quarterback in AJ Serace next year because his mobility is there. But I would say on top of it all, the receivers make his life really easy. Not just AJ, but Ethan too. And I think that's part of the rave too, is that he can kind of, and he said this too, he can kind of throw the ball anywhere. And these guys are just going to go up and get it. Like you have a 6'6" receiver in KJ Duff, a 6'4" receiver who's built like a linebacker at Ian Strong. You have DT Sheffield, who's one of the most explosive playmakers in college football this year, according to just about every college football pundit. So I think the receivers also make the job a little bit easier, but I think this year has a chance to be really special because they not only raved about the quarterback, but they also raved about the offensive line, the receivers. It just seems like the offense will be clicking on all cylinders this year. And it goes, and I think Jerry DiNardo said it, or they asked Jerry about this and he agreed with it. But we've been saying this since spring. This is Greg Schiano's best team yet since his return, and it might be one of his best teams ever since being the head coach of Rutgers.
Yeah, Jerry DiNardo was asked specifically, do you think this is the best team that Schiano's had in his second run at Rutgers? And he said, without a doubt. He's been here every training camp. He's seen what this team looks like. He's actually been very critical of Rutgers in the past, as critical as your own media arm of your conference can be. But he was not very impressed with some of the Rutgers teams of years past and was not afraid to kind of say that. And he said that this team looked much better than they did last year, but it might not mean they have a better record because of the schedule, which we all kind of know about. Mm-hmm. I do think that they took a side ramp to talk as much about AJ Serace as they did, because they were about to finish with the quarterbacks, but Dave Ravine was like, do we want to talk about AJ Serace? Because he looked very good to me and was clearly the heir apparent in the program. They talked about a few really nice individual plays he had, like a 40-yard seam ball, a few passes down the sideline that he connected on. But it seems like the future is very bright for the quarterback position at Rutgers. And we've talked about how important it is to not throw guys into situations before they're ready, both physically and mentally, because, you saw it with so many quarterbacks at Rutgers. You throw a guy in as a freshman or a redshirt freshman and they're not ready, it could just totally, collapse their confidence, and they just will fail developmentally because they didn't have the time to really get to where they needed to before they stepped onto the field. And that's what's really exciting about AJ, is because he's a guy that clearly the staff targeted in the recruiting process, but he's also had, assuming, good health this year, he'll have had 3 full years in the system to acclimate. And how many times did Kirk Soraka say on the broadcast and in the past that by year 3 of being in the system, that's when guys really start to get it? And he specifically was talking about how Ethan in the quarterback room now, all the discussions are so much different because he was learning how the system fundamentally worked in the past, and now he can ask the 301 level questions, not like what do we do here, but why do we do these specific things here? And I think that's kind of a leveling up, we'll say, of a guy in a system. But like you guys both mentioned, they were the most effusive about their praise of the wide receiver group. Dave Ravine went out of his way to basically say, there were several position groups that stood out, but he just kept going back to the receivers. The receivers were the position that stood out the most. And it's going to make for an interesting situation because Rutgers, traditionally under Greg Schiano, have been defense first, and they've played complementary football with a strong running game. But this might be like the upside down version of Rutgers, because we'll get into the defense more later. It sounds like they're going to be carried by the passing game. So Richie, they went into the receivers a lot, but what were some of the things that stood out specifically to you about how they spoke about the wide receivers?
I think it's just Ian Strong. They said Ian Strong had a really good day. We've kind of said that all off season long. Like has such a chance to take a huge leap in this Rutgers wide receivers room and its offense in general. Like NFL scouts are drooling over the possibility of Ian Strong potentially leaving after this year, and it wouldn't shock me if he did. He just has that high of a ceiling. I think he could be a day 2 pick easily at wide receiver. And when's the last time Rutgers had a receiver drafted that high? I actually don't know. I think that's actually a really good question.
Probably Mohamed Sanu.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it'd have to be. It's crazy, but
Crew also went in the 3rd round.
Yeah, so I guess it's technically Leonte, but yeah, I mean, the ceiling is there. It's just he's so close to and it's not just him. It's like what they said about Ethan too. They're all just so close to taking this offense to a totally different level at Rutgers that we haven't seen since the 06, 07, 08 teams. It's just been such a long time since we've seen competent offense, and we got that the past couple of years. We saw competent offenses, and it's like, okay, cool. Like they're going to run the ball 65%, 70% of the time. Whatever works, and it was working. Now you're going to see a Rutgers offense that has a passing threat, and it's like, holy shit, watch what that does to the run game too, because that's only going to open up more holes for guys like C.J. Campbell, Antoine Raymond, Ja'Shawn Benjamin, etc. But I think this wide receiver room, specifically Ian Strong, has a chance to take the top off of defenses and really create some havoc, honestly, in a passing attack that hasn't been seen in years, decades.
Alec, what were some things about the receivers that stood out to you that they said?
Yeah, It talked a ton about, obviously, Ian Strong, like Richie said. I thought they also talked a lot about KJ Duff, just his
Yeah.
progression going into year 2 with his size. I think the fact that a few of the guys, including I think Jake Butt was the one that kind of talked about this the most in particular. He talked about the size that they have, the fact they can go up and get it, which makes me think, I don't know what they saw in practice, but would this mean that we see a lot more downfield passing from the Rutgers offense? A lot more high octane, deep passing scheme, things like that, because they talk so much about the guys, with their size and what they can do to go up and get the ball. Is that something that we see reflected in the offensive game plan? I guess we'll have to wait and see. I feel like they didn't talk as much about DT Sheffield as much as those two guys on the outside. Now, of course, he's going to be a really big part of the offense. Like Richie said, he's been, I believe he was named to the Biletnikoff watch list and a bunch of other watch lists coming into this year. So I just thought it was interesting how much they outlined, the fact that they have the size on the boundary and the fact that those guys can be really good jump ball receivers. We kind of saw that down the stretch last year. Later on in the season, we saw a lot more contested catch situations for Ian Strong. In particular, he was the guy that really kind of made that jump in terms of the deep ball department, the contested catch department. So I'm wondering if that turns into a full season long thing where that's kind of the in the scheme from the get go. And then you add in Duff, who can also do that with his 6'6" frame.
Yeah, and just some more notes that I had, what they said about the wide receiver room. Ethan said that KJ Duff and Ian Strong are the two hardest working wide receivers that he's ever been around. He said anytime that he's asked to watch more film or to throw, they're always the first two guys there, and their hard work's really showing up. Again, Dave Ravine went out of his way to say the wide receivers really stood out to him, and that they've been through about half the training camp tour so far, and Rutgers is one of the most talented wide receiver groups they've seen so far on their tour stops.
Now, of course, today they're at Ohio State, so
yeah, that might change. They have a few guys on their roster. I mean, they're just wide receiver U as well. If you just look at who they've produced and put in the NFL. Greg Schiano, when he was being interviewed, went out of his way to credit Dave Brock for the increased production and increased output of the wide receiver room. The thing he started with was saying how great of a recruiter he was, which I thought was interesting. Not bad interesting, just not bad, not that. But he also said he's a great talent evaluator and he's a great coach, and just said he just kind of knows what he wants. He knows what that looks like at the high school level, and he knows how to coach them up when he gets them to Rutgers. Jake Butt, I thought, said something interesting. He said that having guys with the size that Rutgers has who can move and bend and eat up space between defensive backs is what stood out to him the most and is pretty rare. And he said he saw that from a lot of guys in the receiver room. So really excited about the group. Another group that, and one thing I thought was interesting, I don't know if you guys caught this as well, they basically said nothing about the tight ends. They were not brought up in the entire hour-long broadcast. They have two seniors at the position in Kenny Fletcher and in Colin Weber, but because they didn't really say anything on the broadcast, I don't think we should really go into that. But did you guys also find that interesting?
Not a good sign when two-time All-American, like one of the best Big Ten tight ends in recent history, doesn't say anything about the tight end.
Yeah. Yep. But one thing they did have a lot of good things to say about was the offensive line group. They talked about how in years past, I think Dave Ravine asked Schiano this like pointedly. He said, like, in years past, you said things along the lines of like, we got guys, but we have a lot of work to do. And just from what I've seen, you guys have made tremendous strides along the offensive line in your tenure here. And Schiano went on to say, like, yeah, but we still have a long ways to go. But I think it is a thing that they've pointed out that the offensive line looks a lot better. And we're going to do a little bit of like Zapruder film breakdown, because obviously we don't get depth charts. We're not allowed to say anything about what we see at practice, but this is fair game. We could talk about who is lining up with what group. So, Rich, let's talk about that. Who were the five that were lining up with the first team during the film portion of the show?
So left to right. And I'm just gonna go based off of the show, and then also you can just go look on social media. Big BTN Dave Ravine. I don't know how to
Dave
pronounce it.
Ravine.
Ravine. The
I
S
thought it
is
was.
silent.
I always thought it was Revson.
See, our
I'm
pronunciation on
pretty
the
sure it's
show
Ravine.
is just fucking brutal. Anyway,
What do any of us know?
left tackle Dante Chin. Boom, surprise, right? A little bit,
Shocker.
kind of.
That's truly a shocker.
So that one, there's a little caveat. Like, there's some guys that are sick on the team, and joking around, I was like, yeah, they got the Belmar flu right before they got the camp. Like, someone called it something else. It was Belmar flu, and then there was another name for it. I forget what it was, but it was just AKA insert shore town here / flu. There you go. Because you're crammed in all these little bars and these dirty, disgusting beach houses that are just not cleaned until late September, basically. Maybe if they're cleaned at all. But yeah, so just jokingly, there's a couple guys missing with sickness, so take that with a grain of salt, or take the lineups with a grain of salt that are out there. Left guard, Brian Felter, looked pretty healthy in the clip. Looks like he'll be good to go. Zelinskis, of course, we saw him on the show talking. Kobe Asamoah, not a true surprise there. I think people underrate him too. I feel like we're not talking about him enough because there is some NFL scouts talking about him as well in the background. They think he has the potential to be a potential draft pick next year. So wait and see how that plays out. And then, of course, Taj White, who's the guy at right tackle, has been the guy at right tackle for a long time. Like we've mentioned it. His ceiling's pretty high. And I don't think he gets his flowers enough either because he kind of stepped in last year and, hey, Taj, can you play left guard? Sure, I'll do it. Hey, Taj, can you play right tackle now? Hey, sure, can you do it? Hey, you know what? You want to play left tackle too? Like, just try it out because Holland got dinged for a couple snaps. Go ahead, just do it. So he really is like a Swiss Army knife along that offensive line. When he's made to be a tackle, he was playing inside, outside, left side, right side. So I feel like we have to give him a lot of credit, and he has a high ceiling. But that is the five that were out there yesterday for all the clips in the Big Ten show and all that.
So what you're saying is don't necessarily expect that to be the starting five on August 28th when Rutgers kicks off against Ohio. It just happened to be this practice they were lining up with those starting five.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if that was the starting five, but I mean, 4 of the 5 probably. Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, they did make a ton of additions. I'd be surprised if none of the portal guys they brought in ended up starting because you have a fifth-year guy in Ryder Langsdale, you have a fifth-year guy in Justin Cesare, you have guys who've started a ton in a guy like Mashoud Giwa, who's still young. Zach Amlin hasn't really played a whole lot, and then the last one was Hank Zelinskis, who we fully expect to kind of be the guy who replaces Gus when he retires, or not retires, when he runs out of eligibility after this year.
Yeah. Well, now, you see, now I'm kind of glad you said that because I was able to decipher another little quip, and this was the backup offensive line. It was more so a quip showing AJ Surace handing off to Antoine Raymond.
Okay.
Potential depth chart stuff right there. We know AJ Surace, but Antoine Raymond, right? I mean, it's probably going to be a running back by committee, so it doesn't matter. But if you go through this one other clip from Dave, we're not going to know how to pronounce his last name until I guess we ask him. Left tackle's too hard to tell. Left guard's John Stone. Center's Terrence Salami. Right guard is, who is that? I don't even know who that is. I think it's Nick Oliveri. And then
is it number 70?
Yeah, I was going to say, do you see the number?
I'm trying to go slowly through it, but it's not really helping.
Okay.
Maybe it was John Stone right guard. I don't know. You guys I'll send the
because Zach Amlin is number 70. John Stone's number 71.
I can tell you for a fact Zach Amlin will not be playing this year. Unless it's like down the line, like garbage time. That's the word. Can't really tell who the right guard is actually on this one. Or I'm sorry. Right guard is 79. So it's John. Okay. I got it. Left tackle, can't tell. Left guard, John Stone. Center, Terrence Salami. Right guard, I believe 79 is Justin Cesare. And then right tackle, I don't know who that is, honestly.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's basically it. I think I messed up on that, but you
That's
can
all
go
good.
look at the
We
clip.
have the clips.
Right?
We'll figure it out.
I
But
fucked up again.
that's the Zapruder film portion of the show. Alec, what were some things that the guys said specifically about the offensive line that really perked your ears up?
Yeah, just the progression of the unit. I think Kirk Shiraka was asked about it as well, just how that unit has progressed. And I thought one thing that Greg Schiano said that was interesting, like there's some young guys that are in the mix that just aren't ready just yet, and now I'm curious as to who some of those guys could be. Whether it's some of the transfers like Mashoud Giwa, Zach Amlin, guys like that, who Amlin played. He didn't really get a ton of stats, but he was in a Big Ten offensive line program, a very good one at that. When you think about Brett Bielema as the head coach, I mean, just thinking about some of the other depth guys, even the guys that we haven't mentioned yet that have been in the program. I know Richie mentioned Nick Oliveri. Yeah, just I'm interested to see what the depth looks like past the starting five, and obviously curious who the starting five is as well. But just the progression of the unit since Shiraka has been here, and also the fact that, like you mentioned earlier, year 3 is when it all kind of really starts to click. So I'm wondering if that will apply to the offensive line as well. The unit was already pretty good in years 1 and 2, and now they're down a guy who started over 50 games in the Big Ten Conference. So I'm curious to see what kind of clicking could happen in year 3, even when you got in some new guys who are in some new roles.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Is just how this unit comes together after significant development, a lot of multi-year starters along the offensive line, guys who are no longer green. They're not going to be relying on guys who've never played a snap of football, at least this year. Let's talk about the final offensive position though, because they seem to be. I mean, they said at one point like they were really impressed with the wide receivers, the offensive line, and the running backs. So the running backs, they kind of framed it like, how are they going to replace a guy like Kyle Monungai? And basically everybody had the same rough answer where it's like they're not going to directly replace him, but they're going to have a committee of guys who they think collectively can replace him. So the guys that they talked about in this committee were incoming transfer CJ Campbell, true sophomore and should be a true freshman Antoine Raymond, and Jashawn Benjamin were the 3 specifically that they pointed out. I didn't realize this until they showed the graphic. Antoine Raymond led all Big Ten freshmen in rushing touchdowns last year by a significant margin. He had 8. The next highest was 3, and that was tied by 3 people. So I think we kind of forget how much production he had in the limited snaps that he was given. I mean, obviously he got the whole bowl game to himself. He got the Minnesota game with Kyle Monungai missing it, but it's not like he had, even like close to a handcuff role to Monungai when he was healthy this year. It was basically Monungai, and then he got some, late garbage time or, maybe for a breather or 2, but he was not anywhere close to the number of snaps that Monungai got. So what were some things that stood out to you guys about the running backs? And maybe I hogged all the air there, but Rich, what were something that stood out to you about the running backs and what they said about them?
First off, Dave Refson found it.
Okay.
Second off, guy needs a better phone. Some of these video qualities, it's rough, man. I can't like zoom in without seeing like blurred lines and stuff. So someone's got to get that guy a new phone. Anyway, especially if he's gonna be posting all the clips. Like, running backs, a lot of clips. I shouldn't say a lot of clips because there was a lot of the same clip used over and over again. But there were a couple clips of the Ethan actually throwing to the running backs out of the backfield and AJ doing the same. I think that's interesting because we know Kirk Shiraka historically hasn't really done it, but when you have such a talented pass catcher out of the backfield and like a CJ Campbell type, I feel like you have to use it. I think they're spot on that they're really not going to miss a beat. I know I've said this in the spring when we saw Campbell for the first time, and you saw Antoine Raymond's development too, but they're really not going to miss a beat despite missing maybe your second best running back in program history. I guess you could argue. Yeah, I think you could argue that. So, I mean, even though they're losing Kyle Monungai, like I still think this running back room is going to be super talented. They're still going to be able to get chunk plays and yardage. Are they going to be able to get yardage the same way that Kyle did, where he'd get hit like 2 yards down or up the field and just keep going for another 8 to 9? Probably not. But I think there's a lot of versatility in this group. I think Antoine Raymond has kind of that same similar trait in running style. whereas CJ Campbell is a little bit more elusive and able to avoid the tackles completely and avoid contact completely. So I think the combination of those two, and I wouldn't count out Benjamin too. I know he missed a lot of last year, and I believe he redshirted when it was all said and done. But his freshman year, he showed some talent. I mean, you remember that Washington game down the sideline, that big catch? I don't know if he took it in for a touchdown or not, or if I think he did. But either way, I think that this whole room has a lot of talent, and there's some young guys that are up and coming too. Like we're probably not going to see a whole lot of Terrell Mitchell or Ed Greer, but I do think those two have a lot of talent as well, and they're kind of more of the mold of Kyle Monangai. But there's so much talent up and down that room that I think it's really not going to miss a beat at all.
Were some things that stood out to you, Alec, about what they said about the running backs?
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of said a lot of what I was thinking, just the breakup of how the carries kind of go around. I do think not really anything from yesterday in particular, but just kind of what we've seen the last couple of years. I think Ja'Shawn Benjamin is going to play a bigger role than some of us may think right now because of how much, whether it's Shiraka or Shiano or Athan, how much they talk about him as one of those guys that'll be in the mix. I think he might have a bigger role than we might think. And another thing that is kind of an aside more than just yesterday, but kind of like a whole season long thing. I thought a really good point from the Scarlet Faithful podcast David Anderson brought up was the blocking and how that'll affect different aspects of the passing game. Because obviously, as we know, as we saw with our own two eyes, Kyle Monangai, one of the better guys against the blitz, against any, whether it was a linebacker or defensive back that we've seen at the running back position, just a complete dynamite pass blocker. Without him, how do they progress with guys like CJ Campbell or Antoine Raymond? I guess we'll have to wait and see until they're on the field and really going up against in full game action to find that out. But I thought that was a really good point to kind of think about and how it affects the rest of the passing game where, maybe, like you mentioned, maybe they didn't talk about the tight ends as much because they're kind of shifting a lot of the pickup blocking responsibilities from Monangai at running back to maybe, it's a little bit more of blocking with the tight ends in the passing game. And, whether they're more in the formation more and then kind of releasing later on in the passing play or something like that. I think that's an interesting thing to think about as well. How does that responsibility where Monangai had so much as a blocker at the running back spot, how does that shift over to whether any of the running backs that are there now or maybe even the tight end or anything like that. So it's kind of some things that, I don't think were really talked about that much yesterday for with the Big Ten guys, but just kind of like big picture running back stuff to think about overall.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows who they talked to specifically on screen, talked to Greg Schiano, obviously. They talked to both coordinators, Kirk Soraka and Rob Smith. On offense, they talked to Ethan Kaliak-Manis and Gus Zelinskis. And on defense, they talked to DJ Jabome and Jordan Walker, just so everyone is aware. Let's move on to the defense, though. They, for as much as they kind of gave the offense their flowers, the defense, it sounded like they were not as high on. That's not to say they thought the defense was bad, but they had some serious question marks. So Jerry DiNardo led off things by saying that he thinks this is going to be a better defense than last year. And they went through all the numbers, and he said that Greg Schiano is known for his defense, and he doesn't expect them to be as bad last year. But one thing that did concern me was they were not super high on the defensive line. It was very clear that the offense looked a lot better than the defense in what they saw. And let's start right off with a position that we were kind of high on, the transfer defensive ends. What Jake Butt specifically said was he didn't see a whole lot of twitch at edge, and he said that he thought that the best way that they might be generating pressure this season is going to be through blitzing, which is not really what you want to hear. But it seems like they have serious question marks about the defensive line. Alec, what kind of concerned you or kind of gave you some hope about what they were talking about defensive line-wise?
Well, it was just that point that you made where, not a ton of twitch. And another thing you mentioned, maybe we see some like smaller guys in third down packages in particular, in sub packages. It was definitely a little bit concerning to hear, considering, like we mentioned, these two edge rushers you bring in out of the transfer portal are supposed to be the big time guys. So it's going to be, I'm curious to see how it kind of continues to translate throughout the summer and then once the season starts. Because, the pass rush has been probably the most maligned part of the defense the last 2 years. So if they can't really continue to get that push, then what are they going to do on defense when you don't have Tyreen Powell and you lose half your secondary to graduation in the NFL? So I thought it was mostly talking about the edge rushers. I feel like we didn't hear as much about the interior guys. Now, they could have just been talking about all 4 guys in the defensive line as a whole, but I felt like the focus was a little bit more on the pass rush than like, the interior guys. I thought it was interesting that they talked about how they need to defend the run better and that they're going to defend the run better. I thought that was an interesting point that they made as well.
How about you, Rich? Defensive line wise, what stood out to you?
I mean, the interior's a little bit concerning because, I guess across the whole line, you could say this. It's a bunch of new guys, so they do have to gel. They do have to figure one another out. Sean Griffin had to have some good snaps late last season. Zaire Angoy is the slimmest he's ever been, and has really changed his entire game and his motor and everything. I think between those guys, you might see a lot of rotation along the interior just because you'll have Doug Blue Eli coming in at nose. You'll have Daryl Dengoe. You'll have Olivier Billette also rotating in. So you do have a couple different guys. On the edge, that's where it gets interesting. I think not enough people are talking about Eric O'Neill. I think that I shouldn't even say not enough people are talking about him. I feel like that a lot of people are underrating his potential as a pass rusher. Now, is he mostly a speed guy? Yes, he does have a couple pass rush moves, but he's mostly a speed guy on the edge, and I'm curious to see how that works against some of the big left tackles in college football. I'm sorry, the big tackles in college football and the Big Ten in general. But and then Bradley Weaver never really had a twitch to him. I feel like Bradley Weaver, you see his tape, it's all muscle, and it's all pushing guys off the edge to create pressures. He didn't really turn a ton of sacks last year. I think he had 6.5, if I recall correctly. But I think the two of them could combine to create a solid pass rush, despite not having maybe who knows. Honestly, it's just one day of practice day, so it's not because these guys have shown some twitch early on in the camp. So I'm really curious to see what happens. And you have Jordan Walker, who led the team in sacks last year too, and I don't think anyone really saw that coming. Does he have a ton of twitch? Does he have a lot of pass rush moves? No, I don't think so, but who knows? We'll kind of see how this all plays out, but I think you're going to see a lot of rotations along this defensive line this year, and I think that's going to help them in the long run.
Yeah, Bradley Weaver had 8.5 sacks last year, actually.
Okay,
and 15 tackles for loss.
Okay, never mind. Take it back.
Yeah, I think the unit will have more depth than last year. I mean,
can't get worse, right?
Yeah, you have Jordan Walker, who's now number 1, which is strange to see. You got Jordan Thompson. You got the 2 guys that we just mentioned, Bradley Weaver and Eric O'Neill. And then who knows what they'll develop from the young guys, but it is concerning that they pointed that out.
So real quick before, because I know you want to move on to a different one, but last year, Wesley Bailey was hurt and then he quit on a team. Maybe your best edge rusher. Then last year, Aaron Lewis really didn't do a whole lot, never really got to hit his ceiling or hit his potential that everyone thought he had. And then the interior was what? Ayton, I think?
Well, it was Keontae Hamilton.
Hamilton, who had a very good year in his own right, and he's going to be hard to replace. And then Isaiah Ayton, who was okay. So, I mean, it's going to be real. I still think this defensive line's better than last year.
And then you talk about Hamilton. He was a guy who also had to shift to the outside when some of the injuries struck Lewis and Bailey. So he also had to be kind of taken from the interior as well.
So I think this year's is better, despite them saying there's not enough twitch, which could be true to an extent. But I still think this year's defensive line is just better.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but at the same time, it might still not be good enough from what they were saying. I'm gonna not make a final judgment on this group at the moment, but just wanted to point that out. Kind of narratives that they were pushing, or maybe not narratives, but what they had to say about the group. If we're talking another position group, linebacker, they were surprisingly positive about. I think Jerry DiNardo said that looked like the best unit on the defense on the day, which is good because that was the one that, at least for me, I was the most concerned about coming into the season. Is you have Daryl Jabome, but then it's kind of a bunch of unproven guys behind him. I know Moses Walker obviously got a lot of playing time last year, but he struggled at times. and it's basically a bunch of guys who have never really played a whole lot of football or have been injured, like Abram Wright. Rich, what was, I mean, they didn't say a ton about the linebackers, but was there anything that stood out to you about the linebacker play that they talked about?
Everything I said about Ian Strong, just copy, paste, and throw it in Jabome's bio because it's the same thing. It's a chance to really like be a difference maker this year on defense. We saw it towards the end of last season, led the team in tackles when it was all said and done. But he really came into his own, and he's just not only fast and tall and lengthy linebacker, but he's muscular as fuck. Like, there's no other word for it. This man is ripped at linebacker. If I'm a running back and I see him hitting the same hole as me, I'm just going to run somewhere else. I might even take a couple yards back and just might just take a knee at that point. Like, he is a scary,
business decision.
Yeah, honestly, he's just a scary dude out there. So I think he'll be really good. They only run the 2 linebacker sets. They're going to continue to run that probably. Moses Walker is the one that's really intriguing. A lot of people on staff have said that he's really coming to his own. They think it was more of a learning curve last year, and he had to adjust to just getting out there and getting snaps. Some people are able to watch film, and they're film junkies, like Levante David, who we posted a clip about, talking about how Shiano helped him watch film better and helped him become a better linebacker in general. So some people watch film, they understand it like this, and it's done. Okay, I can go do that. I know exactly what to do now. Other guys are more, it's just like you're in the classroom. It's more like I need to see it to learn it. And he saw it last year firsthand, what he had to do, what he was doing wrong. He's getting a lot more reps. He's gotten the starter reps all off season long. So now he's starting to understand it more, and he's starting to make some moves. Now, he's always had the physical characteristics and the traits. He's always been one of the more athletic guys out on the field whenever he's out there. But this year it seems like it's starting to click a little bit more, and it's what, year 4 for him, year 5 for him. So this is huge for him, and I think he'll be a pretty solid linebacker when it's all said and done. Not to mention, you watch his high school tape over and over and over again. Man also hits like a shit ton of bricks, so it could be scary if you're an opposing running back, and they take the right lanes this year.
How about you, Alec? What stood out about the linebackers? And if there wasn't anything, we could totally just not, you don't have to just make something up, but if there was something, what stood out?
Oh, we don't make stuff up here.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Not that we're making stuff up. I just mean, don't force it if we've talked about it all already. I mean,
I just thought it was interesting that they talked about them as the best unit on the defense, because, like you said, this was one that, we were a little uncertain about for all the reasons that you outlined. So I thought it was definitely encouraging to see them be lauded as one of the best units. And, it seems like they're coming along pretty well. So, yeah, it's because the linebackers, they battled injuries, and because of the injuries, they had to put in some other guys that may not have been totally ready yet and had their ups and downs with their playing time. I think the fact that it's more secure, and they also have a new linebackers coach, obviously, with Zach Sparber as well. So it seems like he's doing a pretty good job too. So it's going to be very intriguing. Yeah, to see how Jabome builds on. I felt like the last month of the season, he really came alive completely and took over the defense. Curious to see how he does when it's when he is taking over the number 1 role.
Yeah, I will be too, because I feel like he really made the most strides of maybe anybody on the defense last year. Let's talk defensive back. They didn't talk a ton about the defensive backs in general. Jerry DiNardo said that he thought the secondary did look better than last year, but overall, he talked about a few specific guys in Jetty Ladd and Cam Miller. I think Rob Smith said that specifically those 2 guys looked really good. But what was anything else that stood out to you about what they said about the defensive backs, Alec?
Yeah, a lot of what you said. I thought it was interesting that, Rob Smith was asked, like, are there any other, under the radar guys or guys that we haven't seen yet that he thinks are going to play big roles? Just kind of talked about Jet Elad and Cam Miller. I'm interested that we haven't heard more about Jacoby Henderson as a guy in that secondary room and the as another transfer. Seeing how he's developed, whether he's going to play more in the outside in the defensive back room or whether he'll play in that nickel role. I'm kind of interested to see that. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. They didn't talk as much about the DBs. Now, that could just be a function of the fact that maybe they're not doing a lot of like the full go stuff in practice that they saw. So it could be a function of that. But just intrigued by the room because, like we talked about yesterday, you got guys like Hodge Sanders and Bo Masco who are the elder statesmen for Rutgers experience in their respective cornerback and safety rooms. So just seeing how they come along, I guess at this point we're assuming that Jet Elad is not going to get struck down by the NCAA for the 83rd time. As long as we don't think that's going anywhere, I'm pretty curious to see how he looks on the field.
Richie, anything about the defensive backs that they said that stood out to you?
I don't think it's anything in particular. I'm just eager to see this team on Saturday and see how their scrimmage and see what they really look like against 1v1s, 2v2s. Because you can only really see so much. I guess you might be able to see more from DBs and wide receivers when they do the one-on-one drills, but it's so much different when you have a safety coming over the top to make a pass break or make a play in general. So I'm just intrigued to see this scrimmage. I think Greg kind of said it a couple times. I think Kirk said it once, and I think Rob Smith said it once. They'll know a lot about this team on Saturday following that scrimmage. Until then, practice is practice. Hell, Art Sikowski was one of the best practice players I've ever seen. And then the game kicked off, the lights came on, and it was just like, I shouldn't say the lights came on. I think the lights went off for some people. But it's so hard to tell really how good a team is. Like even last year, you could say basketball too. Like we saw them practice, and you're watching Ace and Dylan do crazy things, and then you realize they were doing crazy things against D2 athletes, and it's like, okay, maybe we jumped the gun a bit. So practice is practice. I'm eager to see a scrimmage, and I think that will give us a better view of what this team could be or couldn't be.
Yeah, I agree. They're so much more telling than seeing a random practice, because at the same time, like, you don't know what they're focusing on that day, whether it be like a specific position group. Like, for example, let's say that like quarterbacks are really just like trying to get through their progressions throughout the day. So in a situation where a guy takes a lot of quote unquote sacks, it's because they're trying to intentionally go from A to B to C on every pass play rather than just hitting the guy who's wide open on A. So that's not specifically what's happening, yesterday or in any day, but just so we all kind of know, like, practice is intentional and is not always the same as a game in terms of what you can take away from it. Some overall things that I didn't feel like fit cleanly into a specific group. Some notes that I had that I just wanted to touch on before we head out. Jerry DiNardo kept mentioning this specific thing about not seeing anybody on the ground a lot. And he attributed that to having a much better and more athletic roster than in the past, because when guys are on the ground, it's they kind of either don't know what they're doing, or they're not strong enough or fast enough to stay on their feet after they're bumped and redirected or pushed into the dirt by a better unit. Kirk Soraka said that the offense overall is much more consistent this year than last. I thought that was a good thing to file away. One of the things they said about the defense was that they need to be able to stop the run better and force more turnovers than they did last year, and it's yet to be seen if that's actually going to happen. And the final miscellaneous note I had was that Dave Revson, I think we can agree that's how he's going to say his name now. We're just a bunch of idiots who can't learn. Asked Giano about the new athletic director, Kelly Zinn, and what was the main thing that he was hoping that they could do better on, or, I forget the exact wording, but Greg said it's no different than basically anywhere else. They need more money and more support, and he thinks he's going to have that because he feels like there's never been better alignment than they have right now at Rutgers. So those were the final notes I had. In terms of takeaways from this, guys, are you more confident in this team, less confident in this team, or about the same as you were before this episode aired to now? Rich, I'll let you go first. Overall, do you feel any different about this team?
Nothing changes for me. I'm still pretty confident this is still Shiano's best team. Hell, they said it themselves.
Sure.
I think that they're still missing some pieces. I still think, like, I don't know technically. I didn't even look at the defensive line clips to see who it was, but I'm also can't see anything on Dave Revson's camera. So that's the other problem. But I'm still pretty confident this is a really good team. I think that they're going to surprise some people. I think this offense is going to put up numbers, and they're not only going to put up numbers, it's going to be fun and exciting to watch. No offense to the running game of the past couple of years. Kyle Monangai was exciting for some of his plays, but the passing attack is what creates excitement in offense, and it's becoming a passing game more and more. Or it is a passing game. I shouldn't even say it's becoming, because it is one now. And for Rutgers to finally have a legit passing attack with multiple deep threats, and not even with deep throats, deep threats.
Pause.
Yeah, no, that was a mumble of words there. Let's not talk about that. Anyway, they have explosive playmakers, put it like that. So I'm really intrigued to see what this offense can do this year. I think the sky's the limit. And I think that's going to help them win games. Now it's up to the defense to keep them in those games. Because if you could put up 25, 30 points a game, I shouldn't even say 25, 30. If you could put up 30 points per game for Rutgers, the defense has to be able to hold them to 21 at least. And I just don't know if I'm that confident in a Rob Smith coach defense. That's my biggest concern still. I know they like the linebackers. I like the corners. I like the safeties if they're eligible, which they will be probably. I think everything's there, but it's that defensive line is going to come down to if they can create a pass rush or not. And I think the edge rushers are there. I think the interior is the big question mark, and that really concerns me still. But they went out and added some guys. We'll see if these guys can either develop, or the old guys can develop, or these new guys can create some havoc.
Okay, Alec, how about you? Feel about the same, stronger, or not as great about this team?
Pretty much about the same. I definitely think there was a lot of good nuggets to take away. Some of the stuff that we kind of already not knew, but kind of felt like things were heading in the direction, like the wide receivers being a really strong unit on the team. I guess you could switch, kind of some of the takeaways that they had, switch, maybe a little lower on the defensive line, a little higher on the linebackers, as that kind of evening out. But like Richie said, I still think it's kind of hard to have any major takeaways of our own until we actually see them on the field and performing. So for the most part, I think I'm still mostly feeling the same.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I expected what they said about the passing game. That's been what we've talked about for a while. I think the thing that really excites me about this team is that having a not only competent passing attack, which we haven't had even last year at times, but to have a passing game that's a legitimate weapon, it raises your ceiling so much more because you actually can throw some haymakers yourself. Like most big explosive plays, like you guys said, are generated in the passing game. And so you can generate those in the running game, but they're much fewer and much more far between than in the passing game. So that's what I'm most excited to see, because we haven't really had a truly explosive passing game, maybe, over 10 years. Yeah, I'm confident in saying that. So it'll be exciting to see that this fall. Any final things you guys wanted to touch on before we head out of here?
Kind of got a two-parter, sort of. Number one, Ross Dellinger, part of On3 Sports. Pretty cool. Another guy in the Infinity Gauntlet that is turning into On3 Sports. Between him, who else? They added someone else this week. Can't remember who it was. I feel like it's a big name, too.
Was Josh Pate this
Josh
week?
Pate was this week, yeah. Josh Pate's pretty good. If you haven't watched his podcast, I highly recommend it. He is like the go-to podcaster in terms of college football news in general. And he doesn't do a lot of Rutgers stuff. I'm going to push for him to do some Rutgers stuff. We're going to make it happen. Or maybe, who knows? Maybe we'll get Josh Pate on the show one day. But yeah, very big name. And last but not least, if you sign up for, actually, let me see the wording of this. Sign up for the Night Report today. $1 for the first week, plus a complimentary year of The Athletic also included. It's a pretty fucking good deal. That part's not part of the promo, but I added it.
Do they need a code for that, or is that automatically applied?
That is automatically applied. All you have to do is sign up right now, and it's a fucking $1.
Alec,
also,
got anything?
What I put in. That's not what they wrote.
I would hope not. No, I think that's mostly it. They did. The Prudential Center announced the time or the day of the Rutgers Seton Hall game, the Garden State Hardwood Classic. It's, I think, I forgot the date off the top of my head. December 13th. That's what I thought. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. The Devils play at noon that day, so it'll probably be a night game. Which, yes, let's go night games. Night games are always fun. So yeah, that should be a fun one.
Do we go for the doubleheader? Just say fuck it.
It's tempting.
Pull a move from our boy Brat Pack and just go for the Devils game and the Rutgers game.
It's tempting.
That's a long day. If you could pull it off, more power to you.
Well, usually it was the reverse. It was Rutgers would play at noon. The last
Yep.
2 years they did. Rutgers would play at noon, then the Devils at 7. So it might be the inverse this time.
Yeah. Well, if you see me in the press box, half in the bag, don't judge.
Oh man. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for listening. I know this is a bit longer of an episode, but wanted to break down everything that we heard and that was said on the broadcast yesterday. First scrimmage is on Saturday. We'll have, well, these guys will be with you next week. I will be on vacation, so I will not, unfortunately, be able to cover anything that happens in the next 7 days. But Richie and Alec are, you guys are in good hands with Richie and Alec. So
I like to think we're capable.
More than capable. We're also setting up some guests ahead of the season to hear some different opinions about the Scarlet Knights. So stay tuned for that. But I want to also remind you guys we are now sponsored by FanDuel. So if you want to get in on the Rutgers over under for this year, it's set at 5.5 right now, which I'm kind of, it's like a very, very proper line. If you'll remember last year, I was very, very adamant to hammer the 5.5 or the 6 or the 6.5 as it raised through the offseason. I don't have the same level of confidence. If push comes to shove, I would say that they probably hit the over, but I am not nearly as confident as I was last year. So take that for what it is. But for me, Alec, and Richie, this has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.